So let me start with just some introductions. My name's Stuart Easton, um, and I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Transparent Choice. And we're a company that spends all our time thinking about portfolio management, prioritization, capacity planning, that kind of stuff. And we focus there because it has an absolutely outsized impact on the performance of the organization, right? I'm not talking about the PMO. I'm talking about your entire organization. When you get portfolio management right, it really helps accelerate strategy delivery. And at the end of the day, we are not in project management. We are not in project delivery. We are in strategy execution, right? That's our job. We're there to execute strategy. And sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but that's what we're there for, right? So we focus in that area of portfolio management. And I've known Bill for a few years. I guess we met for the first time at House of PMO a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, right?
Yep. Yep. While ago, yeah. One of the
Yeah,
PMO conferences.
absolutely. And it's one of the fun aspects of doing so many conferences is you meet great people. And Bill is definitely one of those people. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, actually, Bill, because you've there's just
Sure.
too much going on that shelf behind you for me to cope.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Drew. First of all, thanks for having me here. I know the timing wasn't so great, but that's okay. Small crowd. We'll get into this. My name's Bill Dow. Like you said, you and I met a couple of years back. I have 30 years in the industry, 25 running PMOs. I've ran 10 PMOs across 4 companies. I've written and published 7 books. You can see them behind me. And in 2023, I won the PMO Global Awards for PMO Influencer, which was really great at the time.
Yeah.
So I've been around for a while.
And where are you now? Tell us a little bit about your current role, just so people have the
Yeah, so
context.
yeah, I'm in University of Washington. I run a very large, complicated PMO in the medical space. So we do all medical projects for multiple hospitals,
And
which
and
is
this is
just
and this is really interesting because in the medical space, for those of you who don't know and have never worked in that space, there are two really big challenges for the purposes of what we're talking about today, as well as all the normal ones. And those are the fact that the benefits are usually largely non-financial, which makes it interesting.
right.
And the second is that very often in a medical setting, and maybe this may be one of the themes we touch on, um, a lot of the decision influencers, decision makers are clinicians, and they think that because they're great at chopping people's hearts out, that somehow makes them amazing business decision makers. And I hate to tell them, it doesn't, right? They can be great decision makers, they can be great executives, but it doesn't automatically follow. Doesn't mean they're not smart, doesn't mean they're not talented, doesn't mean they're not dedicated, but sometimes it makes it difficult to have the conversation with them because they tend to think their discipline is the most important discipline in the world. So we may touch on some of those topics, but the goal today is we're going to be having a conversation about the old chestnut of prioritization, and the subtitle, the title is "Killing the Wrong Projects: Conversation Every PMO Needs Now." And so we're going to have some of that conversation. We're going to explore, why do we need to prioritize? What does it mean to prioritize? What's the impact when you don't prioritize? What happens when you do prioritize, right? What are the good things that happen when you do prioritize? And how might you go about it? And I'm hoping you're going to really enjoy this session because Bill and I don't agree on everything, right? So I'm hoping there are going to be some parts here where we have a little bit of a debate, right? A bit of a discussion. There are many ways up a mountain, right? And I think Bill and I have got some slightly different views on what the best way up the mountain is, and that's great, right? That's what this discussion's for. We're not here to tell you what the right solution is. We're just guides to show you what some of those paths look like, right? So this is going to work much better if you jump into chat and join in, right? Asking questions, adding your perspective, your stories. your observations. I know Ashok's going to do that without any prompting at all. Ashok's a frequent flyer with us here. So I know he knows the score and he'll jump in. And I dare say that Stuart Dixon's going to jump in as well. If you don't know Stuart, Bill, do you know Stuart?
Yes, certainly
Yeah,
do.
you,
Yes.
you probably met him.
Yeah.
You probably met him at
Yeah.
the House of
Multiple
PMO.
times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. All
Yeah.
right,
It's great.
brilliant. Oh, and Ken's on as well. Hey, Ken, I didn't see
Yeah.
you there.
I
Brilliant.
can. Yep.
So Stuart wrote a really cool, created a really cool document, and to my knowledge, it was the first document of its type in the world, which was a sort of formal service catalog for PMOs. And it's kind of a super catalog. It's not there for you to do everything. Yep, there you go. He says it was the first. So it wasn't there suggesting that you should do everything in the service catalog. It was kind of the menu that you can look through for inspiration for what might be the right things. Really useful. You can get that through the House PMO if you're interested. Really cool. Keep coming back to Eileen and Lindsay today. House PMO keeps coming up. So let's kick off with a question for the audience. We're going to get you into chat if you would. And the question is, has anybody here ever felt like you have too much work on? Right? Is there too much in the portfolio? Only a lot. There you go. Oh, by the way, if you don't know Ken, you got to go and got to go follow Ken on LinkedIn. He does the funniest damn cartoons around project management. They are hysterical.
Yeah. Right.
Um, so go follow Ken. Ken's a hoot. Um, yeah. So I mean, we always have too much on there. Um, too many switching on different tasks. There you go, Ashok. You nailed it. Um, and and so another quick question. Does it ever feel like everything is priority number one? Has anybody ever seen that? I remember one of the
Yeah.
yes. People are jumping in. So far, Ken and Ashok and Stuart. Okay, everybody else, you're gonna have to wake up, jump into the chat. We need everyone participating. It's way more fun if you do that. Um, so I remember one of the very first customers that we had. It was a utility company in Scandinavia, and they had 80% of their portfolio was flagged as priority one. When we did the search, we did the research and looked at the projects, what we discovered is that a third of the portfolio was obsolete. Now, if you do the maths, it's impossible that they basically what that means is it was guaranteed that they had some of their priority one projects were obsolete.
Wow.
How
Yeah.
does that happen? So, Bill, over to you. Let's
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about um, everything is priority one. Why does that happen? Because you've been doing this for longer than most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think, you know what, I think one of the biggest foundation, like why this happens the most, and this is across multiple companies, right? It's because we very much look at narrowly for our organization. So when I was at Microsoft, for example, we would look very narrowly, and the GMs and the VPs would do, what do I need for my organization? What do I need for my organization, right? And across the different groups, they would all say, this is my priority, this is my priority. The problem they're dealing with is they're dealing with the same set of resources. So I think the one problem that we run into and why everything's number one is because we don't look holistically across the company. We look what does suits the needs of my organization, marketing, sales, HR, right? And so everything's their number one, but yet you have a fine pool of resources that have to do that work. So when we don't have a solid strategy that all the individual organizations are rolling up to, then everything's number one, and resources have no idea what to do when everything's number one, which is a huge problem
all right.
because you get into task switching.
So smash a heart or a thumbs up or something if that sounds familiar to you, because that sounds spot on to me. So before we dig into sort of some of the stovepipes and the consequences of that, let's just talk. Let's spend a minute or two. So Bill and I do have a list of questions that we're going to try and cover today, but I did warn Bill that we're likely to go off piste and just go romping from
It's
time to
okay.
time. So
Yeah.
let's go romping for a bit.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I hear again and again is, um, first of all, a lot of PMOs aren't necessarily comfortable with what strategy is, right? It sounds big and scary and expensive. That's what McKinsey does. That's not what we do. So let's kick off with that. Yeah, what is strategy? What does it actually mean when somebody says we've got a strategy?
I think we've got a direction to which we're heading our organization. We know what we're trying to do, we know what we're trying to go after, and we know how we're going to move our business forward in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think with the amount of AI and all the world that's changing, I don't think you can go further than that. But I do think a strategy means we have a set direction for a company or a group or an organization that drives us forward for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? And the time scale varies. If you're in a tech startup, it might be 6 months.
Yeah,
If you're
true.
if you're you probably have a slightly longer time horizon than that, but for your strategy, not for your tactics, for your strategy.
Yeah,
But and if you're in a utility company, at the highest level, your planning horizon is 30 to 50 years, right?
correct.
They're big strategic bets are 30-year, 50-year bets. That's the lifetime of a power generation plant. So it could be
Yeah,
anything in between that. But basically what it means is we got a plan, right? We
but
know where
yeah,
we want to get to, and we've got a plan to get there. And so the way you get there is through projects, right? So now let's think, you were talking about the different stovepipes, different people in the different
yeah,
organization. So if we
departments. Yeah.
so if we've got a strategy, how is it that people in different stovepipes aren't agreeing on this stuff?
Well, if you've got a 50-year plan from what did you, what was it, a nuclear plant or a gas pump or whatever, you got a 50-year plan. How does that affect HR? HR still got strategy. HR's got to hire people. They got to fire people. That has nothing to do with the overarching running of the business technically, right? But they have a strategy. They need HR systems. They need payroll systems. But we need a larger strategy to put a new nuclear plant or a new gas pump or whatever, right? And so that's where I think there's the disconnect is that strategy is for the business, but not the individual department. And so,
Right.
how do you align HR to the global strategy of a 50-year plan or 50-year strategy type of thing? That's where I think the fundamentals break down.
And I like to think of that as, what one man's floor is another man's ceiling, right? So if you think
Hmm.
about an apartment block, the guy at the
Yep.
top, the CEO, he's got his
Yep.
strategy, right? But his floor, he doesn't think about anything below his floor.
Right.
But his floor is where the guys below him start, right?
Right.
And that's as far up as they're looking, and below them, below your divisional heads, you've got departmental heads, and below that you've got team leads, and below that, and
Yep.
every one of them has a plan, right? They've got goals, they know where they want to be, and they've got a plan. That's what we call the strategy, right? So it's
Hmm.
nothing massively mysterious. You don't need to be going off and looking at PERT charts and SWOT reports and all that kind of good stuff. It basically just means we know where we're going, we know what the goals are we need to hit to get there, what capabilities we need to develop, and we've got a plan to get there. So given that, how is it, you know, so we know that each of the people in these different departments have a different view of what their local goals are. So they have their local strategies, and those strategies are competing. They're competing for the same resources, you said. So when
Hmm.
everything's priority one, what's the impact of that? What does that do to the business and your ability to execute?
Well, fundamentally, resources that are doing that work have no idea what to work on. right? There's no solid list that they can go to say, do I spend time here? Do I spend time here? Do I spend time here? Right? So you get multitasking, you get context switching, you get these scenarios that have been, really been a bane of existence of resource and project teams for years. And that just becomes everything takes longer. Everything it does not work. That context switching does not work.
Excellent. So I'm going to spin that because I was just reading Ashok's comment there. So when you think about what you just said, from the resource point of view, resources are kind of task oriented. Project managers are project oriented, but the business is strategy oriented, right? Business goal
Mm-hmm.
oriented, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So when everything's priority number one, basically what that means is the guys doing the tasks don't know which tasks are most important. So have
Right.
you, so I'm really interested, have you, I mean, because again, you've been doing this a long time. Have you seen situations where, um, a relatively unimportant project has derailed something that's really important
Yeah.
because
Pet
the priorities
projects,
weren't
right?
clear?
Yeah. Pet projects, right? We must cram this in. We must get this in. And everything else has to stop because some executive in HR says, we got to get this project in. It's got to go in. It's got to hit a deadline. It's got to hit all the scenarios there. But yeah, we've seen that for years. For years. Yeah. And then everything stops. And it's like, okay, everyone focuses on that. And then everything else gets pushed.
Cool. And actually, Stuart Dixon was just mentioning there about context switching as well.
Yeah.
What's your experience around that? Because it's not just everything stops, everything else stops. It has an impact on productivity as well, right?
Yeah, it sure does. And I love what he said is increases the likelihood of people moving to other companies. And that is so true. The problem is the grass is never greener. That same thing's most
Hmm.
likely going to happen in the other company too, right? I've seen very few scenarios where companies are really good. We're putting out a priority list and having the resources go from 1 to 5, right? Or 1 to 10, 1 to 20. And these are the things that you work on. So you may go, this is impossible. I'm never going to work here anymore. Go to a different company, and you're landing in the same situation.
Have you seen anyone in those 25 years in PMO leadership? Have you seen any organization that does this really well?
Um, Very few. We've had, yeah, I've ran a couple PMOs where I had a solid priority list, and everyone knew the exact order. And
Hmm.
we demanded that at the C level, at that or the GM level in this particular case, we demanded that priority list,
So
and
what
we
was the
said
not
this is
what
the
was
order.
what was the benefit of that? So what did that feel like, right? When what you got that in place, what happened downstream? What impact did that have in reality? Because we often talk about this stuff in the abstract, but you've got the
Yeah,
real experience, right?
yeah, yeah. You got projects done faster because they were working on multiple projects, but when push come to shove and they had extra time, they had time to work on a project. They knew which order. They knew what project meeting they should go to based on the order, right? They knew. So things got done faster and we just were very efficient. Now we were waterfall. We're still a waterfall world, but we did get things done faster and more efficient because they knew exactly where to go to. And I had a PMO dashboard that had the priority list and they could keep going back to that priority list.
Great. And just to put some numbers on that, funnily enough, last week I was looking at a bunch of research papers into this. And so when you cut down on work in progress, right? So when you reduce that loading, projects accelerate.
Yep.
So the you know the and the numbers vary between sort of 30%, 50% increase. But I've seen companies. I was talking to someone in Slovenia, of all places, about a month ago, and they had put in place they'd put in place actually some fairly basic prioritization and capacity planning. And the net result was, drum roll please, an 84% increase in velocity in project throughput.
Wow. Yeah.
80,
Yeah.
84%.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you,
It's incredible.
do you ever feel for how much faster you were going when it was all working? It's just, I'm kind of
No, because it
interested.
was just so efficient, right? It was just so efficient. Yeah, no, we never really tracked those type of metrics because we just had a process in place from an intake to a governance to a priority to publishing a priority list and then just cranking, just
Yeah,
going off that list.
yeah. And actually, Stuart made another quick point in the chat there about changing the conversation around when can we start the project, right? Because we've all had that. So when you had clear priorities, how did the relationship with the leadership team change? Because as you know, Stuart says, you probably weren't having the same conversations with them every day about why haven't you done this? Why isn't this started? Why isn't that finished?
Yeah, like you said, it gets to more of a when do we deliver it, right? Let's really focusing on the delivery, and so the conversation has become much easier because everything's executing at the highest level. And so it's less about red projects or yellow projects. It's more about how do we help get these roadblocks moved so we can get these things executed. So at the top priority projects got the most attention from the GM level at the time. They got the most attention to get these resolved so they can keep moving. Because every project has problems, but it's where the executives put their focus to help fix those problems and move those roadmaps.
So you actually found that it didn't get rid of the RAG reporting, but it changed the way it was used. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because it was more about removing roadblocks. Because these are our top priorities. We got to go and help these PMs and these teams remove those roadblocks to get them done, so we can complete them. It was all about completing, not starting.
Right.
Because everyone thinks that they want a project started. They don't want a project started. They want a project ended. They want to finish the project. They want the results of the project. But we kind of keep turning on. Let's start more. Let's start more. Let's start more. Our focus is let's end more.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Let's
if you're doing the
complete more.
prioritization right, you're ending the ones that add the most value.
That's right.
So you're ending more, you're ending them earlier, so you're delivering the value earlier, and it's the right project to start with, right? So you're
Yeah.
delivering more value per project. So the what we've seen is that when you do this right, we've seen the flow of strategic value, right? So we have a particular way of measuring that, but the flow of strategic value, we've seen it more than double in some customers. Not everyone,
Hmm.
right? Not everyone, but in several, we've seen that kind of step change in performance. And it sounds like, if you add it all up in your environment, you probably got a pretty substantial increase in value from that. Do you want to try and put a
Yeah.
number on it, or too vague, too difficult,
Yeah, too hard, really.
too
And
hard?
I think that's too hard in general, right? Like I think that's the thing is that when we think about value, when we think about the ROI that we're going to get back, that is such a fundamental problem that we have in this industry right now because those numbers are really hard to get, especially if they're a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, right? Who collects that value? Are we really getting that value? What has the dollar changed in that? Is it still the same, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of factors to that.
And
So
and very
yeah, I'm
often
not
and,
going
and
to put
very
a
often the
number.
R in ROI isn't money.
Right, right.
In that HR example, it's something
Yeah,
about efficiency or
yeah,
people's motivation or retention,
yep,
right?
yep.
Um, okay, fantastic. So you said something really important, and it kind of whizzed by, which was you said something along the lines of, "We demanded this from the C-suite." Okay, so this is where most PMOs I talk to struggle. how do I get the leadership team to pay attention to this? How do we get beyond just sticky notes or edicts from the strategy team that say, this is what we're going to do, go and do it? How do we get
Yeah.
how do you get beyond that?
Yeah.
How do you get that
So,
buy-in that something has to change?
yeah. So I put this in both of my books, and it was about getting executive support, not getting one, getting multiple. And you start with your own executive, and then you start going to other executives to get more and more support, right? So, first of all, it all starts with getting your own executive to support the driving of this priority list and this order to which you tackle things. Then it's going and having that executive work across their peers and their management level to say, we got to do this. This is, it's not working the way we're doing it. So it's really about starting with executive support and continuing to get more and more executives bought into that process. And then it comes down to delivery. Once they start seeing the execution and they start seeing projects finish and customers are happy with the execution and the ROI and the delivery of these efforts, then they're going to go, oh yeah, okay, this is working. More and more executives will buy in.
Right.
Right. But it's not an easy thing. You have to have, it's all about your executive support, your current one, and then up and sideways, peers, if you like,
So
and
so
getting
what
multiple.
so what was that first conversation like with your line manager then? Because
Yeah.
getting their buy-in, that's the first domino. So how do we
Yeah.
what was that conversation like?
Well, that's generally easy because you're direct to them. They own your organization, right? They own the delivery of the 50 people or 60 people within the PMO, right? So that's generally easy. What you need to do, or easier, what you need to do is figure out the talk track and the messaging for that executive to go across their peers, right? That's the harder conversation. And that's decks, that's one on ones, that's kind of spending time with them to understand what's in it for them. What do they benefit if they get, if they buy into this concept that you're trying to do of setting a priority and getting things worked in order? And that just takes a lot of political capital. It takes a lot of, you have to have the execution experience. You have to have trust in it. They have to trust you. And it has to be kind of a non punitive environment. And I think that's a huge component because if you work in a non punitive environment, then you're going to have people that will go, yeah, let's give it a shot. Yeah, let's give it a shot. Right. And then as things start executing, everything just starts going in place.
Yeah. And was it that first conversation, was it you going in saying, dude, our people are falling apart, this just isn't working, we've got to change? Was it you going in
No,
saying, hey, we've got an ROI problem? What
no.
was that start point?
Yep, 100%. So when I do it, every time I start a PMO, and so basically it's a round of conversations with executives, with peers, with directors, and it's where are the problems of the PMO, what's happening, what's going on, and it's really about gathering data because every PMO is different, every company is different, every executive team is different. You need to go in there and understand exactly what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Once you have that data, then you can start using that data to say, here are the common themes, here are the common problems that we're finding. How about we now need to put some of this stuff in place, right? All of our projects are going along. We got 50% CR rates or whatever the case may be, right? But you're doing it from data. Everything's about data. And then you start building your decks and your presentations and your talk track around how do you solve that data. That's what you're taking up to your initial line manager. And then you're taking that across because it's those people, or those directs or those peers that you've talked to that have complained. Hey, when I talk to Sally, who's in HR, she says X. I talked to Bob in finance, he said Y. All that's data that you formulate and you can use to formulate your plan forward.
Brilliant. So let's see, Stuart and Paolo um, were both at Laura Barnard's session in the UK a couple of weeks ago. And so you guys, I hope you're paying attention to this because this sounds an awful lot like what we talked about with Laura, right? So you got two of the smartest and most experienced people in the industry saying the same thing. Maybe, yeah, all hell, Laura. Um, so maybe this is important, right? Maybe we need to pay attention to this process. Just say it, it's kind of interesting. Uh,
Yes, I didn't see it, so I'm glad she's aligned with me.
yeah, absolutely. We're not going to get into who said what when. To be honest, I don't think there's anything that you've said here that is revolutionary or
No,
proprietary super secret squirrel
no,
stuff, right?
no. It's just
Uh,
years of doing it,
right. Well, and
right?
this is just how you sell ideas,
Yeah,
right? This is just how you
yeah,
build. If you think of your PMO as a business, this is the way
yep,
I approach it, right? I think of the PMO as a
yep,
business.
yep.
So as a business, who do you go and talk to figure out what product you should be selling? Your
Customers.
customers. Your
Yep,
customers, right?
yep,
So we're just doing market research.
yep.
And then we're developing the products that those customers want. And then we promote the products to those customers so that they realize the benefits, right? They realize why they're doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a really good point, though. I'm just going to stop you there for a sec.
yeah.
I think that's a really good point because you think about this, so do I. I treat these PMOs like businesses, like their own organizations, like, right? So you think a hotshot project manager who's an amazing project manager gets promoted into a PMO manager, PMO director role, they're not going to think of it like a business. It takes years to get that mindset and that confidence to go, we're running a business, we're running an org, right? We're running an org that has people, that has mortgages, that has divorces, that has deaths, that has all these kind of things, right? That's a difference. And then when you treat it like a business, you attack it, like you said, go after the customers. What are the pain points? How do we move this business forward? Right. And that's a fundamental shift that PMO leaders and PMO managers and PMO directors have to take. It's not about cranking through the software, it's about you're running a business.
And just to put that into context, right? Um, uh, who remembers Google Glass, right? The glasses, those
Yeah.
horrible glasses, right?
Yeah.
So Google's running around saying, "These are really cool. Look what we can do." Nobody bought them,
No.
right? So they were selling what they thought was cool, not what the organization needed or wanted.
Yeah.
And so now Meta's trying again, right? With the Meta glasses and other brands are available, of course.
Yeah.
And um, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens because there are some communities for which it appears that it's starting to get some traction. So the partially sighted community, for example, where
Yeah.
they can say, "Hey, read me this label on a tin," right, or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So they actually they listen to that community. They develop some apps around it. That's awesome. But the wider community, I was listening to an article earlier, were just kind of going, do you know what? It's a little spooky. I'm walking around, I'm recording people, they don't even know it. It's a little spooky, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So look for inspiration everywhere is my message.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so before we leave this thing of getting execs buy-in, so are there any sort of tips? People will typically talk about understand what the problems are, think about what the root causes are of those problems that they perceive, and then help them understand, if we fix that root cause, how does your life get better, Mr. Executive? So do you have any of those kind of formulas that you like?
Um, or not necessarily formulas. Say that again. Let me go
So
down. Yeah.
so the process. usually when you're trying to solve a problem for an exec, the way I approach it anyway is I will ask them, I'll collect the data, and they might say, if I was a doctor, they might say, I've got a sore head, right? Now you could tackle
Hmm.
a sore head by just giving someone some aspirin,
Hmm.
or you could try and figure out what's causing the sore head and
Yeah. Oh, okay.
and treat that thing, right? Go back to the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you don't go back because the executive doesn't necessarily understand the link between their pain, projects are late,
Yeah.
and the fact we need to fix prioritization because
Yeah.
it's all they say is projects are late, so I'm going to kick the project manager. But
Yeah.
actually, that's not what the problem. The problem is that
No.
everything's overloaded, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so how do you again in the past, how have you had that conversation with them? How have you helped them join those
Yeah.
join those dots?
Y- Yeah, again, all data, right? It's an all data conversation. So I have for many, many years ran a project server, project online / Power BI environment. And therefore we have all of our data in this spot. So we have all the dashboards, we have all the, right, all the data that you can possibly manage. And when we have these situations, we bring the data to them. We're seeing 50% CR rates. We're seeing 50% of projects are doing CRs. We're seeing, 90% of our projects are red. So it all becomes a data conversation because people may not like data, but they don't fight data, right? Data is data. And so I always think that it's easier to bring data and drive through how do we solve some of these data points to these executives who don't mind looking at data. I have, over my course, I have looked at executives, worked with a lot of executives that like seeing data. They're like, give me the data. They want decisions and they want where do we go with it. They don't want thousands of rows of data, but they do like data. They do like trends. They do like to see what's happening. So I like to bring back data to them. And then we decide what our problem is to go after.
So let's just another quick detour. Data versus insight. Is it data they want, or is it the insight from the data?
It's the insights, but remember, it follows a path, right? Data becomes information, information becomes knowledge, right? It does follow a path, but it's ultimately insights, right? But everyone makes insights based on how they perceive and they read that data. And you, as an expert, you have to help them with those insights. You have to see this is what we're seeing. Why do you think our projects are 50% CRs? Well, because we're working on 200 of them,
Right.
right? And so, of course, people are multitasking and things don't get done on time. So it is data that will then bring insights, which will then bring clarity to move. How do we move forward?
So we've got the execs, we've used data, we've convinced them that they need to fix prioritization and the portfolio management. Um, what's been your experience on how to actually take that journey to fix
Pilot, pilot, crawl, walk, run. I've said it for years. Crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk, run. Pilot, right? Just try it and pilot and fix forward. Right? Fix forward. And so I've always thought, let's pilot this, let's test this, let's see what works and doesn't work, and then we can adjust and go forward. Right? Because there's no sense looking back. It's all about going forward. How do we go forward with it? Right? And so yeah, it's been about piloting really.
Okay. And what might that look like? Because there are lots of different ways to do prioritization, and some of them work better than others. Some of them are easier to implement and adopt than others. So what's kind of been your path? Do you think there's one road through there, or how do you see that in terms of
No, I see
the
there's multiple. Yeah. But it does come down to so, I've had some really solid prioritization and scoring system across the PMOs I've ran. Very solid, right? Some have been really weak, some have been really solid. And it does come down to the business that you're running. So when I was running a PMO and marketing at Microsoft, that had an unbelievable governance system, unbelievable prioritization system, right? So I have ran some really solid, and I think it really depends on the prioritization and the scoring of that organization, right? I ran a PMO in operations, which was about releasing the products, right? And the Microsoft products. And again, that had a prioritization, right? Based on when they had to go time to market. So there's not a set prioritization system based on the business to which you're working in, right? But there is a set of what's the benefits, what's the score, what's the risks, how do we get a weighted score, that concept of a weighted score. Now, people manipulate the weighted score, they do a lot of funny math with the weighted score, but in general you do get a score, and you do get that this is what we should be going after to move our business forward.
So let's pull a couple of the things that you've said there together with what you said earlier about people in stovepipes, right? People in the different
Yeah.
departments doing their thing. Um, oh, the AI has gone crazy. There we go. The
Yeah,
robots
see
are
that.
taking revenge. Here we are, back to it. Um, so one of the challenges that you have when you try and come up with a weighted scoring, and by the way, so this is the bit where I'm expecting Bill and I are going to diverge a little bit, and that's absolutely
Okay. Hmm.
so Bill is very much, he's lived it, he's done it, he's found ways, he's solved problems, he's just got the damn thing done, right? Um, when we started thinking about prioritization, we looked at, okay, how do we build it the right the right way, right? So there's a lot of research into how to prioritize in large organizations so that it sticks, so that it actually works really well. And so, there are lots of ways to do prioritization. You can literally lock people in a room and say, don't come out until you give me 5 projects we're going to focus on, right? That's not a great way to do it, by the way, because that selects for who shouts the loudest and who's got the most
Right.
influence, right?
Yeah.
Rather than what our strategy actually is. So the best ways to do it are all different forms of weighted scoring. Okay, so this is what you were just talking about. So you have a bunch
Yeah.
of criteria. I'll share the screen so you can see. This is how we do it. There are other ways of doing it, but just so people can see, you have a set of criteria. So we've got some financial, strategic, and risk criteria. And then underneath there, we've got a bunch of other criteria. I'm not going to spend a load of time on it.
Sure. Cool.
But the key bit that was really interesting was the conversation about people being in different stovepipes.
Yeah.
So what the research says is that there's this methodology called AHP, Analytic Hierarchy Process, which works really well at getting people up and out of their stovepipe. So as a leadership team, what you would do in this way of doing it is you would present, here are our criteria, here are the business goals basically that we've written down. And we're going to ask, which one of these is more important, A or B? And is it a little bit more important or a lot? But crucially, we're doing it as a leadership team, right? So everybody's voting independently. They can't see each other, right? And then once everybody's voted, then we can reveal the votes and we can say, hey, Samantha, can you explain your point of view? Hey, Emily, can you explain your point of view? And what's happening when you do that is when you start this process, what happens is Samantha will be in her stovepipe. She'll be saying, well, this is the most important because I'm in sales, and in sales, we need this, right? And Emily will be saying, yeah, but I'm in manufacturing, and in manufacturing, we need this. And so this is the forum where you say, but hang on, in this meeting, you don't work for sales. You are part of the leadership team of the organization, right? So what we're
Yeah.
trying to do is we're trying to understand each other and learn from each other and build the whole picture, build that holistic picture. And when you go through that, you go through each pair of questions, and then that gives you a set of weighted criteria, which you can then score projects against that. So weighted criteria aren't very interesting. It's just a pie chart and a bar chart, but you get a set of weighted criteria that you can then use to score and evaluate your projects. There are techniques you can use to evaluate to improve the scoring, by the way, but we'll not go into that right now. So when you do that, what kind of pushback do you get, if any, and how have you overcome it in the past?
Yeah, so I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's a great process. I think what you said, the key thing that you said there is you don't work for sales. You don't work for HR. You don't work for finance. You're part of a leadership team that's trying to drive this company forward. And that is probably the hardest, easy statement to say, but the hardest statement to actually get away with, because you would need a very strong C level to say, we are a leadership team. We're going to act like a leadership team. And then that process would work perfect. Otherwise, you have HR, finance, right, all trying to get their projects done. So I think your process is excellent there. I don't see any disagreement. I just think that there's a concept of trying to change the mindset that they're part of a leadership team and they're not representing their organization at that time.
Well,
That's huge.
what's really interesting, Bill, actually, is that we never say that in the
Hmm.
meeting. It just happens.
Yeah,
They say it to each
yeah,
other, right?
yeah,
They have that
yeah,
conversation on their own. We don't need to say it.
yeah.
Um, uh,
That's
uh,
great.
it's really interesting. They come out of those meetings going, "Oh wow, we've never been aligned before like this." It's like, oh,
Yeah,
that was really
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Um, and again, it's not the only way to do it, but it's
Sure.
it's the
Yeah,
way the research says works best. But actually, it's a little bit like cameras, right? Is your smartphone the best camera in the world? Well, if it's the camera that you've got with you at the
it
time you need
is.
a camera,
Yeah.
then yes, it
That's
is,
right. That's
right?
right.
And so prioritization is a little bit like that, where, do you know
Yeah,
what, if you've got a team that's just really immature and they're pushing back, do something simple. Don't try and do
right.
the fancy weighted scoring thing, right?
Crawl crime. Yeah,
Because it'll just come across as being, this is bureaucracy.
yeah,
Just do it however they'll do it. Just give them sticky
yeah,
notes and let them argue for an hour,
yeah,
and then show them the acceleration.
yeah, yeah,
Once you show the acceleration, you can go back and say, great, okay, should we improve this a bit? Because we can do better than this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Does
yeah.
that?
But even getting to that first level would be incredible, right? Because most companies are not even there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so
Well,
so as you so you've built some kind of weighted scoring mechanism, so you know which projects are most important. What do you then do with that in reality? How do you take that, or how have you taken that and translated that into the acceleration you were talking about earlier? Because that's actually it's the alignment and the acceleration. Those are the two things we care about here. So
yeah,
if you do
that's
the
your
scoring right,
yeah,
alignments. So how do you turn it
yeah.
into acceleration?
That's your published priority list. That's your one solid list onto a SharePoint site, onto a dashboard that people can go to make project trade-offs. That's the one place they go to saying, this is the priority, right? These are the priority of the projects that we're going to work on. Everyone agrees to that priority. There's no decisions around that. Here's a priority list. Now go work off that priority. And now resources can look at one, two, and three. And if they're on one, two, and three, they know exactly what to spend their time on. And they can push back. They can push back to the PMs and go, you just booked me, but I'm working on one and two right now. So that's where you have to have that published priority list.
Perfect. I love it. Stuart Dixon actually just put in a comment while you were talking. I just managed to read it. Um, Reminds me of a story when we were all together in London the other week. And I forget whether it was Stuart told the story or somebody else, but they were working in a PMO and they were trying to get the execs to pay attention to this stuff. And what they did was the execs had handed down a list of, do this, and the list was too long, as it always is. Um, and so they went through that list and they interviewed them, said, what are your business goals? What are the big goals? And then they went through and mapped the projects to the goals and showed how many of the projects simply didn't map to any of the goals.
Hmm.
And the exec team was flabbergasted. What a
Yeah,
great word. Not enough people use that word, flabbergasted. I
yeah,
love that word.
yeah.
But the exec team was flabbergasted, right? And suddenly they're paying attention, right? Why are we spending money on these projects? Why are we deploying our resources to do these things if they're not supporting our goals?
Yeah.
So that can be a good way to get the process started.
Yeah. There'd have to be in the alignment of the weighted score, the goals have got to be in there someplace, right? If you think about benefits and risks and how
100%.
you actually calculate the weighted score, the goals would have to be in there. So if you're going to do that process right, you're going to have goals and factored into that.
And in fact, when you look at the decision science that underpins kind of weighted scoring and all that kind of good stuff, the word goal and criteria are almost synonymous,
Almost. Yeah.
right?
Makes
You know,
sense. Yeah.
90% of the time you could swap those two words and not notice.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So your criteria in that weighted scoring model should absolutely reflect the goals of your business.
Yeah.
No debate. So if you've got a
Yeah.
set of KPIs that your business really cares about, that's a really great place to start thinking about criteria. Just look at that KPI list
Yeah. Yeah.
to get the ball rolling. So
Yeah.
in your environment, then I'm interested in this. What you didn't say in your answer when I asked about how do you turn that into acceleration was you didn't start talking about creating roadmaps and trying to figure out what order to deliver stuff. You just kind of said, we're going to take the top three off the pile, and when we're done, we'll add another one. And when we're done, we'll add another one. Is that
Yeah, yeah, I think the pile is large, right? And so I mean this, but at least we have a priority to the pile. But again, I work in a project online, project server environment. I have Gantt charts. I have all this data that's all pushed in Power BI reports, and we have all this visibility like crazy. So we can see how things are lining up. We can see Gantts on top of Gantts, right? That's just part of
so
the
you're
functionality.
projecting out what's the
We can
loading on your
project out. Yeah.
resources? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are. So
Yeah, we
you
have
are.
heat maps. Yeah, we have
Okay.
timesheets. We have heat maps. Yeah, we have an incredible PMO with a ton of data.
Okay. So that's really important. I want to dig into that just a little bit more because this is where the acceleration comes from. Is doing that capacity planning. Not so much
Yeah,
the resource management's important, but it's that capacity planning that's
yeah,
important because that's how
yeah,
you avoid overloading people, right? So
yeah.
so so what talk us a little bit about what that process looks like. What are the goes intas? What are the goes outers? Right? So what's the data you need to support that, to feed that process first?
Timesheets. So timesheets. So we have done 10 plus years of timesheet data. So we have timesheet data at the operations level. So lights on, doors open, and we have timesheets at the project level. So we have every resource have got time that they put every week into onto their projects and onto operations. And then from there we have heat maps. So we can project out. We can also see at the weekly basis how much time, how many out of the 40 hours, how much are they spending on every project, and that projects out as well. So we have incredible data with this timesheet data.
And are you using that also to try and estimate projects up front? Because if you've got timesheet data for previous projects, are you using that as kind of a baseline estimate? Or have you not quite got there yet?
Kinda. Yeah, not really. We have experts that are estimating what they think the costs are, but or the time is, but no, not really. Kinda, but not really. Because
Well,
it all comes down to the charter and the original BRD and baselining your schedule, right? To see kind of how big is this rock that we're trying to tackle.
right. So I tell you what's really interesting here is that one of the things that I hear people complaining about all the time is timesheets, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
what's the value of this? Why do we doing this? This is bureaucracy. This is you guys just
Yeah,
being bureaucrats and accountants and all that kind of good stuff. But I had a conversation a month or two ago with Joe Camper. You know Joe. Um,
yeah,
uh, and he said the same thing to me. He actually walked into a situation where he had something like 15 years of timesheet data.
yeah,
And he told them, oh, he went in and said, why are we collecting all this timesheet data? No, you don't need timesheet data. And about 2 weeks later, he went back to his leadership team and said, no, I'm wrong. I had no
yeah,
idea what gold was hidden in that timesheet data.
yeah.
Ah,
It's incredible. It's incredible. And that's a fight I've heard for years with other PMO leaders. We don't need timesheets. We're white collar people. That's for blue collar. No, it is incredible the data that you get with timesheets. Just incredible, especially from a LODO or lights on doors open and a project perspective. You
Hmm.
can see exactly where an individual is spending their time. It's incredible.
And so once you do that, just to give you an idea, the kind of stuff that you can do once you've got that data. Let me just come and share my screen again. Is that once you've got kind of estimate data, where are we going? We're going to go with this one. Have I got the right one? No, wrong one. Let me pull this one over. Here we go. That's it. Um, you can then, this is all the output from the scoring, right? Doesn't really matter. We're not going to, this isn't really a demo. I just want to show the idea of what Bill just said. So we've only got a certain amount of capacity, so we can overlay what capacity we've got. We've scored every project. We've got an idea of what that baseline estimate is for each project, and so we can dive in using a bit of funky AI and actually figure out which portfolio should we deliver, right? Sorry, I think I hit the wrong button then. There we go. So what the software is doing is it's figuring out which combination of projects should we do to maximize the value given the shape of our resources. And then once you've done that, and my laptop's being a little slow today, but there we go. Then you can figure out what sequence, so that heat mapping thing you were talking about a second ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the software just ran through 37,000 scenarios to figure out what order should we deliver our projects to optimize that heat map, to minimize the amount of red on your heat map,
Wow.
right?
That's
So it's
incredible.
figured
Yeah.
out that if we just delay this project for a couple of months, right, we can accelerate these other projects and so on, right? So again,
Wow.
I don't want to turn this into
Yeah.
a demo session. It's not really meant to be that, but it's really just to highlight, that there are tools that can do this now,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
didn't exist 3 years ago,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
couldn't have done that 3 years ago that way.
Yeah. So the
Um,
trick
so the
is how do
world's
you
so
get
the world's
companies to do
changing.
timesheets, right? That's the trick is how do you get companies to do timesheets? Because then your
And
tool
oddly
like that
enough,
would be incredible.
and we've had customers who forget timesheets. We've had customers who push back on even trying to do estimates,
Yeah.
right? Because if
Yeah.
you don't have, so they would push, they'll sometimes push back and say, well, we don't really know how long the project's going to take. Okay, that's why we call it an estimate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and with the AI, by the way, as you learn more about the project, you just update the estimate, press the damn button again, and it updates your roadmap. So,
That's amazing.
that's cool. So how do you have that conversation? Because again, as you're putting some of these processes in place, timesheets, scoring projects, estimating projects, these are all disciplines and things that businesses may not actually be doing today. So how do you get the buy-in to do that?
It's got to be top down. It's the grassroots won't work with timesheets. There's too many people that are, these are my resources. They work for me. No, it's got to be top down. It's got to be a direction from the highest level to say, thou shalt do timesheets. And yes, it's going to be painful to get started, but the amount of data and the amount of information we will have over a course of years will be what we need to move our business forward. You can't grassroots timesheets. It won't work. You got to have the
Interesting.
systems in place. You have to have the processes in place. It's got to be top down.
Excellent. Okay, so we've sort of used an hour somehow. I don't quite know how we got to the top of an hour.
Yeah.
So we spent a bunch of time talking, just recap, we spent a bunch of time talking about, um, you know, why is it a problem? How do you get execs engaged? We spent a bunch of time there because that's when I don't know if you have the same experience, Bill, but when speaking at conferences, the question I get more than any other is, how do I get the execs to pay attention?
Yeah.
So we spent a
Yeah.
bunch of time on that. So apologies, that was a slight tangent, but probably an important one. Um, then I think we've got, ultimately you want to head for a weighted scoring mechanism. Start with some kind of pilot to get the thing going. Help start with your line management, help them understand how this is going to solve their problem. Their problem is not that your people are overloaded. Their problem is that projects are too slow and they're going over budget and they're always red, right? Usually something
Yeah.
a bit like that.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
probably going to be something about visibility in there as well, that they don't know what's going on.
Right.
Usually,
Yeah.
there usually is. Not that you and I have had these conversations a
No,
thousand
for
times.
years. Yeah.
And the conversation doesn't change,
No, that's
which
the
is
thing.
what's
It doesn't change. Yeah.
I think that's what's most frustrating. But anyway,
Anyway.
so when you put that in place and you use that to drive your roadmap, then good things happen. Everything accelerates.
Yeah.
You're delivering the right projects and you're delivering them faster. And the
Yeah.
thing I loved that came out of that is I promise we didn't rehearse any of that stuff. We had an idea of what the questions were going to be. That was it. But this is the stuff I bang on about all the time. Oh, AI's gone crazy again. Is that not only do you deliver the best projects, but they actually accelerate. And to
Yeah.
hear that that was your experience is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So so if people would like to find out more about you, Bill, and particularly about your books, right? Because there's a lot of what you've talked about today is buried in various different of those tomes on the shelf behind you. Where
Yeah.
where should they go to find out more?
Yeah. Just buildoutpmptraining.com.
There you go.
Buildoutpmptraining.com.
Excellent. And again, as in his introduction, Bill was quite modest, but influencer of the PMO influencer of the year, and he speaks and is a very respected speaker actually on the circuit around the world. Did the keynote at House of PMO a couple of years ago, which was
Yeah.
a
That's great.
hoot. So really glad you could join us today, Bill. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.